Okay, perfect. So it seems lots of us have landed here and maybe others are to come. So officially welcome. We have decided, or I have decided to offer more of these webinars rather than to be on IG or Facebook Live. So we have a bit more of a contained environment for these topics. So this is the first one that we'll do, and just these free webinars. We also offer, and I often offer longer workshops and immersions, and some of you are part of those as well. But I wanted to start offering once a month these little webinars on different topics. So if you also have inspired yearnings of how you would love to see Ayurveda shared in one topic or another, you can always direct message me or direct message us at RASA, and then we can look at what future webinars might look like. So we have until 11 o'clock to really share in this topic today, which was in correspondence with Valentine's Day. So if we let go of the commerciality of Valentine's Day and really see it in this purity of prem, this purity of unconditional love, And I like in some other countries, they've made, like in South America and in general, in the Hispanic world, they call it the day of amistad, also of friendship, so love in all of its aspects. And maybe we'll get into that a bit also from the Vedic tradition, how love is seen in various aspects also. So this is our topic for today, love and sexual health. And within an hour, there are so many other things that we could, it's a very wide topic that we could touch on, but a lot of it, I welcome you also for it to be discursive and really to come from a lot of your questions. There are things that I'll share with you, but also things that I would love to be directed from what's alive for each and every one of you. So maybe what we'll do is let's just settle for a moment. So wherever you are, I know some of you might be in the car or some of you might be in places where you can't close your eyes, but if you can, come to close your eyes. So let the eyes close and let there be a sense of stability. Just for a moment, groundedness into being here totally. Let there be a sense of internal quietude. And for a moment, let's connect to what it is that has us here, what we might call in the Vedic tradition our sankalpa. What's our intention that's drawn us to be here this morning or this afternoon, whatever time it is where you are. But what's that call of the heart to hear that, to soften into it now? Then just allow yourself to stay settled as I chant, just really allowing the space to be, in many ways, sealed and contained by great peacefulness and grace and deep intentionality. So let yourself just receive this beautiful Ayurvedic prayer as it moves through. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantaraye Amruta Kalashtaya Sarvamaya Vinashaya Trailokya Nadaya Om Namo Bhagavate Namaha. Om Shri Dhanvantari Namaha, Om Shri Dhanvantari Namaha, Om Shri Dhanvantari Namaha. May the space within us and between us be blessed by the great lineage of Ayurveda, by all the great Ayurvedic Vaidyas and teachers and doctors, and may this be for great health on every level of our being. And as we come to this topic of love and sexuality, may it bring a release of any spaces of suffering or strife and bring more peacefulness and joy to our places of self-intimacy and intimacy with the world and beings around us. Let's enjoy one more nice full breath there, and then when it feels good for you, coming to open the eyes. Okay, so again, welcome to all of you. It's nice to settle in this way and to have a safe and contained space together in this way as well. And the intent, as I said before, is really for us to be able to share in ways that are serving to you. So I really welcome. Oh, please put yourself on mute if you've come in. Yeah, I've just placed you on mute. So just make sure you're on mute. So really places that are of service to you is what I was saying. And in that way, any questions that might be arising or things that might be arising. But maybe as I started with, we can just start from a contemplation there, as I was mentioning, this gift and blessing. Yesterday, one of my friends who's from Mexico gave me flowers and said, these flowers are for Valentine's Day, but because, as I was mentioning before, because it's also the day of amistad, of great friendship. And it's so beautiful. This friend is married and the two of them gave me these flowers for that day. And I felt very touched and contemplative in thinking about this, how we often relegate this day to romantic love and to romanticism, and how on some levels we also confine the full breadth and width of what true prem, as the word in Sanskrit, intends towards, which means the unconditionality of love being, actually. That at essence we see from a lens of love, and we see life also as an expression of love. And so this amistad, connected me also to these other aspects. And actually in Sanskrit, they speak to 5 different forms. Please put yourself on mute. They speak to 5 different forms of love. And the first is this prem, is this unconditionality of love, that in deepening in our own self-knowing and deepening in our own self-settlement, that we have more and more of if I can say it, a love lens in our lives. It's like just now, I wish I could show you, actually, as we were starting the call, there is the most graceful dance of snow falling that's occurring. And it felt like a love caress, as I was turning on the Zoom and coming here, it's like seeing through the lens of life's love. So love in the snow. This is prem ultimately. And then how does that translate into our relationships, into our friendships and also into our intimate relationships as well? Is there an unconditionality in our love? So prem is one of these 5. And another, like in Spanish, is maitri. And maitri means friendship or compassion. It's this love form that really means to bring friendliness in our connections, to love through friendliness. And I feel this is one, that right now, especially on our planet, a lot of us could use, and especially in this country. Many of us are in Canada right now, right? So to be more friendly in our love, to see another being, even if they're an acquaintance, or even if they're someone that somehow we've stepped into the falsity of separation consciousness, of polarization, that we can see with the lens of friendship love. This is a beautiful offering from the Vedic tradition. Can we make friends with all beings? Can we make friends with this earth? Can we make friends with our own selves and our own lives as well? Can we make friends also with our own embodiment? I mean, that's a huge one. We're a group of women this morning. And so that's probably a very big one for a lot of us. Can I be a friend? Can I be a loving friend to my own body as it shows up? Can I be a loving friend also to the sexual movement that moves through me, through my own loving of my own pleasure also? So this maitri, this friendship, which friendship, compassion, both of those are kind of understood as maitri. And then there's 3 other forms as well. Actually, does anyone want to guess? I'm wondering if anyone has any guesses about these other forms of love. What else you think might be there? Any guesses that arise? I had no plan to share this. There was no plan for this morning. We just arrive and we see what love does, We see how it arrives. No guesses. Okay, so like I said before, we obviously have an aspect of romantic love, right, as well. So Srinaga, this romantic love, is something that, and we can see the great dance, for example, between Krishna and Radha in the Vedic tradition, this consorting. Some of you may not know about these traditional deities. I don't have an image here. I have an image in the other room, but it's this great love affair. And there's a great romance of their love affair, the way in which they come together. So there is a recognition of romantic love, that we have this romance for life and for other beings. And there's something beautiful also about this. This is also one of the aspects in which our love essence comes to express through us. But that's also an interesting one for us to see. Does romance only find its way expressed to one other being? Or can we find romance in other parts of our lives? I know some of you are artists and poets, and many of you have great creative endeavors in your lives, or you're coaches. And there's a certain romance even to the way in which Dharma and purpose can move through us. It's an interesting one to contemplate, how love can become romantic, how we can bring this romanticism to our lives. So that's a third aspect of love. Any guesses for the last two? Anything that's there?
I'd say the devotional love, the love of God, religious love.
Yes. So Shanti said that. I'm just going to mute you, Shanti, because it gets a back echo. So as she was saying that, absolutely. So there's also bhakti. Bhakti is one of these 5 forms of love as well. And bhakti means devotion or worship, to have this worshipful love, to have this devotional love. And again, this may be sparked by other beings around us. This may be sparked even, this bhakti, this adoration. We often think, as Shanti was saying, maybe it's a religious love. We might think of it as for God or for the divine or for a deity or for the chosen way in which we come to connect to Great Spirit. But actually, this bhakti, this adoration, can be a great fragrance of any personal relationship even. So we can have great worship of the divine as it's seen in an intimate partner, but also in our children, in the people around us. It was so sweet. This morning I was with these friends who gave the flowers, and their older boy is now learning to speak English. And so as I was leaving, he said, "Bye, Tiffany." And he started sending, kisses like this. And so he was practicing, because usually he would speak to me in Spanish. And then he did this motion, to hug. He's 3. And then he looked at me and went, "I love you." And so how it moves through children also, right? So beautiful in this way of adoration, of bhakti, to really bow to have reverence for beingness, to have adoration for other beings. And of course, a lot of us are saying, yeah, that's the ultimate hope. But what about when someone really pisses me off at the grocery store, or as I'm driving the car? Or how do all of these aspects of love show up then, right? How romantic am I feeling about my drive to the grocery store or the other person in the line? Or how much friendship am I feeling? Or how much am I feeling this bhakti, this adoration? But these are all sadhanas, actually. These are all places of practice that we can widen out into, that we can really ask our hearts to become more developed in. Excuse me, one sec. That really is like a muscle, the heart, hridayam, the heart being, as it's understood in the Vedic tradition, really is like an organ that can be taken care of or not. And so this organ can be developed or not, actually, in many ways. So as we come towards this day of Valentine's Day, is it just about roses and chocolates, or is it really about working on developing this organ of the heart? So we've touched on 4. And then there's a 5th, which is interesting, because I bet that 90% of you showed up to this talk because of the 5th one. So I'm wondering if anyone has a guess what the 5th one is. Now you're like, why did I show up to this talk? Or why did I show up to this webinar?
Probably the sexual love.
Yeah, so Daddy's saying, like, what about the sex? We're here for the sex. Yeah, so absolutely. So the 5th is kama, and kama means pleasure or desire. This pleasure-built love, or this desirous aspect of us, which is also seen as an expression, or lust, if we might call it. Sometimes the romanticism aspect of love, the trinaga, is also seen as lust as well. But this desiring aspect, this pleasure aspect, that pleasure lives in us, and that it's an expression of love. And that's an interesting one also, I think, for us to marry. For a lot of us in our Western context, those things have been really separated. Love versus desire, and there's a versus. Rather than a recognition that desire and pleasure and lust and, the calling to connect with another being, that all of that is born somehow of exactly that love, which is a calling to be as one, a calling to be together, a calling to know our no separation. There's some calling in all of life, actually. And I often say this also when I'm sharing the women's courses, or that that sexuality and the coming together with another being, especially, is so natural that we see it throughout all of nature. All of nature is constantly magnetized. And I don't just mean by, the birds and the bees, like we say, but also we can even see the way in which the flowers pollinate each other. This was one of the most beautiful examples I saw. We have masculine and feminine flowers, and the way they come together to bear fruit or to bear vegetables. I don't know how many of you have known that or seen that before, but it's amazing to see all of the pairings that are actually happening even in nature. This is Ayurveda, actually, the knowing of life. And in this topic, when we talk about love and sex, it's the knowing of life as love, as sexuality, actually, as pairing, as togetherness, as coming together. Not two, not separate, that everything always rallies to be magnetized, to come together somehow. So there's a lot of beauty that we can start to explore even from the beginning of this topic together. So those are the 5 forms of love. I'm wondering if anything's coming up for anyone as I'm saying that. It's like, I know many of us being in Canada, we say how many different words are there for snow in the Inuk language, right? So the Inuits have how many different words for snow? Because when you really know snow, when you really live in snow, there's a diversity of expressions of snow. So when you really live in love, it feels like there's a diversity of expressions also of love. And I think this is something beautiful for all of us to contemplate. What is this thing that we've always called love? Like, I can only love personally certain people, or I can only be in love with a certain person. It gets a bit dangerous if I say I'm in love with other people. Some of you might also right now be with husbands, or they're saying, oh, I don't know about this Tiffany. Right. So the expression of love, or how it is that we come to love, or we've been conditioned around love also, is something that all of us can come into deeper contemplation around. Some of you are sending smiley faces. So any things that are coming up for anybody now, or any questions that are already arising? I'm wondering if anything's there. Okay, well then, as Shashi said, well, we're here for the kama. We came, to hear about the kama aspect as well, what Ayurveda has to say about that. So for those of you, I'll just put it in the chat, the word kama, which means pleasure. And actually, just to highlight, maybe some of you have heard this before, especially those of you who have come to the 50-hour Ayurveda immersion, and also teacher trainings. I've shared with you previously that according to the Vedic tradition, inclusive of Ayurveda, there are 4 great fulfillments in a human life. There are 4 major fulfillments in a human life. And of course, the ultimate fulfillment is moksha, is that we be awakened, liberated, free, that we really be free of heart and being in this life. But the other 3 are what? One is artha, which means right livelihood, that we really be fulfilled in having a right livelihood in our lives, and that livelihood be righteous, that it be right placed somehow, that we be doing good on this planet through our livelihood. And that can be doing good as a mother, that can be doing good as, contributing in the ways in which we contribute. You don't have to think of it, as we often think, as this grandiose idea of what our livelihood is, but that our lives, our livelihood, and the way we sustain ourselves also is right placed. Then another one is dharma. And so what dharma means is that we have great purposefulness to our lives. And that purposefulness could be separate from our livelihood, or it could actually also be connected to our livelihood as well. But that our life have purpose, and especially that life purpose be connected to deep inquiry, like that our lives really have deep meaning to them, that there be a meaningfulness. So we've gone through three of them. But what is the fourth of what are called these four fulfillments? The fourth is actually kama. The fourth is that we have right enjoyment, right pleasure, right desire in our lives. They say to really come into our human wholeness, we, in this life, part of our fulfillment is to have right pleasure, that enjoying our lives is a gift. It's part of the reason that flowers come in all different colors. And when we go to the market or we go to the garden, that everything comes in different flavors as well. Otherwise, I mean, life would be pretty monochrome, right? If pleasure or kama wasn't part of this whole dance of what we call in Ayurveda prakriti, nature. You know, nature provides herself in such a diversity. Why? I mean, why? If we weren't supposed to enjoy and have pleasure and be in the connection with this diversity, why would she provide herself in that way? And I don't have the answer. I'm just asking that hypothetically also to all of us. I mean, so in that way, kama is this right pleasure, that we neither be so pleasure bound and so pleasure in so much pleasure bondage that we are in complete addiction to the pleasure craving, nor that we be totally denying of pleasure. So we really, because oftentimes in spiritual traditions or in religious traditions, we're told somehow that pleasure is wrong. That we shouldn't have pleasure, that we should deny pleasure somehow. So Ayurveda is a very body and pleasure inclusive tradition. And it says actually that all of us can have right pleasure, that our lives can be filled with right enjoyment. And that enjoyment is especially found in deep presence. And this is what Ayurveda teaches us, to be truly present in any given moment. And when we come to that depth of presence, something happens in which we savor, right? It's like, I often remember that first time I ate a strawberry. It was also historically, referenced because I ended up in a newspaper. So I remember we went on a trip and then we were at a berry picking farm. And so I still remember this, but I remember the taste of strawberries coming, or let's say a strawberry off a vine, a warm strawberry. And what is it in us that blocks us from that level of pleasure and enjoyment from every time we eat a strawberry? It's the entitlement of been here before, done this before. I know what a strawberry tastes like. It's the conditioned mind, right? Often gets in the way and veils. So there's something about when we talk about kama as one of the aspects of love, that love and pleasure are really found in deep presence, are they not? It's like something emanates from life when we're truly with it. There's much more freshness and tastiness and savoring to our lives when we're truly basking in any given moment. And that can filter into our relationships, whether it's with our intimate partner, or it's with our children, or it's with people in our lives, even colleagues. Imagine how often we block ourselves from the true enjoyment of another being, or the true joy of being with other people, or the true love of other people when we take for granted that they're in our lives, one, and also when we take for granted who they are. I mean, how many of us want to be seen in freedom, want to be seen, different than we were 5 years ago, or even different than we were yesterday, to be really seen, to be seen. And in the same way, much of the challenges, I read yesterday that 55% of Canadian marriages end in divorce. And that's the number of people who get to marriage. A lot of us partner now without marriage. So that's a shocking statistic, right? When we look at that. So more than half end up in divorce. What is that? What is it that moves us from the absolute sense of loving and connection and pleasure and all of the things that are there to all of a sudden such a sense of dissidence and separation? From the Vedic tradition and from Ayurveda, we could say it's losing this tending to the heart. When we stay in the tending of our own hearts, when we stay in our own self-loving, when we have our own strong daily connection to our hearts and our beings, then that fragrance also finds its way into all our relationships. Doesn't mean that we necessarily, as superheroes, we necessarily change everybody around us, or they're, not moving in maybe some disconnecting ways. But it definitely means that we're more available to seeing people as they are and to seeing their goodness and their kindness. There's something that opens and reveals in that. So kama karma, this great enjoyment of life, is one of the four fulfillments. And in that way, Ayurveda also highlights, and I think this is some juice that's interesting for all of us to know, it highlights that sex, intimate connection with another, is for two main reasons. And this is why we come around to this. And I often hear from people, they often have the understanding that in most spiritual traditions or most religious traditions, that sex would be only for what? So what have you, told yourself or heard, right? I see some of you like lip syncing it, right? Like progeny, for procreation, for reproduction. Like that's what we've been told, whether it's in Catholicism or Judaism or, somehow in Hinduism, people come to this concept, this idea that it's only for reproduction. That's the purpose of it. And what does that set up? That sets up a whole host of guilt if you have sex ever for any other reason than reproduction. And most of us, if we're having 2 kids in this life, then you do the math. It means there's going to be a lot of guilty pleasure going on. I've had no kids, so imagine what's happening over here. So in that way, Ayurveda soothes our beings in understanding actually that there are 2 main purposes. There are 2 main sankalpas, 2 main intentions to intimacy, to kama, to pleasure, especially as it refers to sex with another, okay? Because pleasure can come in different forms, as we just went through. And those 2 main reasons, one is for progeny, and progeny is really revered in the Vedic tradition. Like to have children and to bring the boon of the next generation is really seen as a gift, a flow forth of giving forward in our energies and of dharma, of great purposefulness. And it is seen as a beautiful act to be done in this life. But the second reason, what do you think the second reason is for sexual connection, according to Ayurveda? And this isn't something that Tiffany conveniently made up.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. So Shashi said it exactly. So the second is absolutely, is for pleasure, is for kama, is for this embodied kama, this embodied knowing of what it is to be in our pleasureful selves, that we've been given pleasure for some reason. Again, just as I said about the flowers and all the flavors of fruits and vegetables, etc., and all that is this planet, why would it be also that our embodiments experience pleasure? Experience the pleasure of a strawberry, but also experience sexual pleasure. If it really was just for reproduction, and we can come into an inquiry around this, if it really was just for reproduction, why would it be that it's so pleasurable? I mean, is it just to tease us, or is it just to make it more difficult? Or is it like God had some kind of trick to see whether or not we could withstand, Is it like a wrathful God, give you that much pleasure, but tell you it's only for, this doesn't seem to make sense. So just as, when we go, I'm looking out to the quarry that's here, when we go and dip in beautiful, pristine waters, there's a beautiful pleasure to that. And when we eat the strawberry, and when we see the dance of the snow, and when we embrace another being or we touch and hug, right? All of these things, we know what it is to have actuated pleasure. And Prakriti, I'll just put this word for you. Oh, I see someone else has hopped in. Prakriti, I'll put the word in the chat. Many of you know this word already, but Prakriti means nature. It means both the nature as in the macro nature, the universal nature, all of nature, all that we see in manifestation, but it also means our nature. And so nature has offered forth a whole host of ways in which we can know and experience and savor pleasure. And so similarly, we've been given that in the micro universe of our embodiment. And Ayurveda doesn't, and we should all be happy that we've arrived to this point thus far, does in no way say that you should deny that pleasure. That we should deny pleasure, or that it's something to feel guilty about, or that sexuality is only for reproduction. It has both of those intents. And this already, I feel, is great healing medicine for a lot of us to just know and to hear. Like, what would it be to really relax into the beauty of the pleasure? And also, because many of us, I feel, we become more liberated in our sexuality in, the Western world. So we say, no, I'm really like, I'm into the pleasure, but also to find that place of right pleasure. This is another thing that I think can be a deep contemplation, because as I said before, Kama is really about finding the Madhyama, finding the middle place where pleasure is love, pleasure is presence, not pleasure is craving or pleasure is denied. And this, I think, is a huge contemplation, a huge inquiry for a lot of us, because when we look to the sexual field in a lot of our countries today, pleasure has become craving. Hence also when we talked about divorce. So for example, all of the online things that are happening, all of the internet stuff and all of this that occurs now, right? This is pleasure gone awry. This is a constant seeking and craving for pleasure, or adultery, or, all the various ways. Or I hear from a lot of young people now, the lack of yearning towards sacred commitment, polyamory. And I'm not in any way saying that there's anything wrong with this, but there is a collective sphere in which we feel more comfortable with that somehow today, because we haven't really been taught through tradition what it is to be in sacred commitment and to experience deepened pleasure there. So we're at a certain cultural and societal place where I think this can also be contemplated, to find that right placement, this middle place with the beauty and the gift of pleasure. So at RASA Ayurveda, at the beginning, when there was decisions about what I would like for us to offer in the apothecary, one of the areas that was very important to me was that we also have things like the yoni wand and the yoni eggs. And sometimes, I have to be very clear with people about why we have these, right? Because there's so much idea of taboo and so many, there's just so many conditioned kind of eclipsings that happen in the Western world, that there can't be beauty and love and grace and pleasure all together. So you see something like a yoni wand and you think immediately dirty and taboo. It's amazing to me. It's a dildo, right? It's like, the marriage of those things are not something that live in a lot of our Western conditioned systems. And it especially links back to this guilt around pleasure, which for a lot of us comes from that Judeo-Christian background and imprinting. Like to really be okay with pleasure, even to be okay with our own self-pleasuring. Now, interestingly, what I do want to say very transparently is that in Ayurveda, it's said very clearly in the text, and this is why, we often, and at RASA also, the attempt always is to share Ayurveda now, as it applies really now as well. But in the Ayurvedic text, they say very clearly that one should only have sex, actually, with genitals. So I'll say that very clearly. Like it isn't, there's no suggestion in Ayurveda actually that you use any kind of external apparati, that anything be used. Nevertheless, and even in the original texts of Ayurveda, even oral sex is not highlighted. So it's an interesting one, for us to think of. But also those times, everybody didn't have the same access to showers and bathing and all the things that we have today. There's a lot of different, things that were occurring. So is this an Ayurvedic prescription to use something like a yoni wand, or to use something like the eggs that we have, the various gemstone eggs? Not entirely in its, let's say, in the tangibility of the use of those things, but in the reclaiming of our pleasure and reacquainting ourselves with the comfortability with pleasure, absolutely. And these tools and the use of these come a little bit more from Taoism. So those of you who aren't as familiar with Taoism arises from the Chinese tradition. So traditional Chinese medicine and Taoism come more from the eastern areas of China and also of Japan. So we find more Taoist approaches there. And they had amazing sexual priestess practices for women, including the use, for example, of yoni eggs. I brought the yoni eggs to show you. And this was always known and continues to be known as a practice for all women to not only acquaint themselves with their own unfolding in the area of their yonis, etc., and to keep health there, but also as a pleasure-based practice. So both. I've got all three. So let me pull them out of the different stones that we have. Can you see those? Okay, yeah, now you can see them. I bring them up a bit higher. So this is our rose quartz. This is a medium size. I don't know if it gives you any idea because you don't know how big my hands are. My hands could be huge or very tiny, right? This is obsidian, this guy, which is the larger one. And this one's the teeny tiny jade. Now, often a lot of us say, like, you see that after kids and you're like, yeah, that's not staying inside. Not quite sure what's going to happen with that one. Or we see this one and we go like, oh my God, maybe that's a little bit too big. So this is why we have different sizes and also the different stones. But traditionally in the Taoist tradition, they would always use jade. Jade is one of the most balancing stones that really helps to emanate a balancing and healing energy throughout all of the internal reproductive organs, but also into the abdominal organs. So it's really well known for kidney health, for example, for liver health. And jade is a very neutral stone also that the body usually in the yoni will also meld with, if I can say it in that way. There are other stones, so don't just be putting any stones inside, okay? There are other stones that are more porous that we never want to use inside because what they can do is there can be bacteria, etc., in the stones. So these 3 stones we can use. So the reason we have these at RASA is because with my background in Tantra, we also practice Taoist practices. So I lived for a long time in a yoga kula, in a yoga community, which was also tantric for many years. And so these tantric practices of embracing pleasure and coming to acquaint with our own pleasure was part of the yogic unfolding, if I can say it in that way. And it's beautiful in this way from everything we've discussed, part of the coming into love for life and love for this embodiment also, to embrace that. So these Taoist practices are something that I've worked now with, I would literally say thousands of women. It's been so beautiful to see so many women working with these from everything from, let's say, postpartum atrophy, for example, to also women who have been pre-orgasmic. So women who have never orgasmed before, starting to wake up and open the area, to those who have dealt with trauma also, to just those of us who want to maintain optimal yoni health, if I can say it. Isn't yoni, maybe that's new for some of you, but isn't it a beautiful word in comparison to vagina? Totally different ring to it, right? My yoni versus my vagina. It's just such a different word. And the word for men, for the penis, is lingam. So lingam. In the Vedic tradition, the yoni and the lingam are so beautifully revered. I should have brought one up, that in almost every temple, and I'm wondering if any of you have seen this before, in almost every Hindu or Vedic temple, there is what's called a Shiva lingam. And there will be a literal statue of a yoni surrounding a phallic symbol. And it's the coming together. It's the symbolizing of the coming together of the masculine and the feminine. And it's in the temples. Okay, and milk is poured on it and flowers are offered to it. And there's really this reverence of Shiva, of God's lingam. This is the idea of God's dance of marrying, that everything comes together, that everything is constantly in wholeness, in merging, that there is no separation, there is no duality. Now, of course, there's men and there's women. And I mean, today we have a lot of contemplation around that, but genitally we can see that also arises. And so there is this call to come together. In the Vedic tradition, they speak of other times on this planet, thousands of years ago, when people actually weren't diversified into two genders, in which actually we were all wholly complete unto ourselves. We were already in self-love making, if we can say it in that way. So we didn't necessarily need that same uniting. But today, it seems that in this specific time, we are called somehow. The attraction principle is a principle that is a natural part of Prakriti that calls us to be in connection with another, like we were saying. So the Shiva lingam is this yoni and this lingam coming together. So the yoni is revered as the womb of life, as the goddess, as the great feminine aspect, as the great aspect of creation and creativity. And similarly for us as women, in our micro universe of our embodiment, this can start to become a place of bhakti for us as well, that we start to have more and more adoration and worship for the womb of being that lives within us, for our feminine holding of this prakriti, this nature. And this is how the tantric practice also sees our embodiment, to really have the deepest love and honoring for those aspects that we've been manifested as. So as women, being manifested more as that receptive, open, receiving, invitational, womb, creative, all those energies. And as men, being more penetrative, directive, having this aspect. Now, again, because there is today more and more conversation and actualization of gender fluidity and transitioning and transgender, and with all of this, we can also speak about the essence of a being. That some of us feel more in a masculine essence, or some of us feel more in a feminine essence. I'm also acknowledging of that. We know that that exists. But karmically, we are born with specific engendered reproductive organs as well, which can determine certain energies that move through us. It's an interesting one for all of us to be in inquiry with. So the yoni for us as women is something that when in, if I can say it in this way, when in balance, when in its own harmony of great pleasure, is not just about localized sexual pleasure, but it actually starts to animate this kama as life within us. And this is an understanding from Tantra and Ayurveda that when we start to have the pleasure of really adoration and love for our genitals and love for the yoni, and she's in deep health, then that translates into the rest of our lives as great lovemaking. Like, how does that pleasure then fill into how you make a meal for your family? How does that pleasure, and we know it, right? There's this beautiful book, and I constantly reference it actually when I'm talking about sex. And I haven't watched the movie or come to this book in a long time, but it's called Like Water for Chocolate, Como Agua para Chocolate. Have any of you seen this? The movie is with Salma Hayek. I think it's in the 90s. Okay. So that's your Ayurvedic homework, is to watch this movie or read the book. And in the book, she has this love-torn love affair with her brother-in-law, so her sister's husband. Oh my goodness, right? So it's like a true telenovela, okay? It's a true soap opera. And it's situated in Guatemala. And she's the cook of the family. And it's amazing because every time she cooks the energy of her yoni, literally. And let me express to you what I mean by this. She cooks the sadness of longing that's in her yoni. Or she cooks, for example, the horniness, the turned onness that's in her yoni. It translates into her food. And what they go through in the book, and I won't ruin it for you, but also in the movie, is they show the expression of her pleasure energy that then translates into the food. So when everyone sits down to eat, they start crying. And they're like, why are we crying from this food? Or everyone gets a little randy at the table. And they're like, what's happening? What's happening with the food today? So in the Ayurvedic tradition, when we look at that, sex is also revered, not just for reproduction, but also for pleasure. It allows kama to start to infiltrate our lives. And this doesn't have to be just with another, because a lot of us ask, maybe I'm in a sexless marriage, or maybe I'm single, or maybe I'm, whatever it might be, or maybe I'm abstaining currently. It can also be like I was showing you now, for example, with the eggs or with a yoni wand, or just simply sitting into meditation with the pleasure that resides here. We can be more and more unfolding to our pleasure in a whole host of ways. It doesn't require necessarily another being. Doesn't mean we don't celebrate if there's another being also, but it doesn't require it necessarily. That pleasure lives within us. It's the very naturalness of us. And so part of, what this ancient Taoist practice for women was about was unlocking the space of great creative power and pleasure that lives within a woman. And so when you start using these, it can be like, I'll often say to women, it's just like you wear a crystal around your neck, and it's placed on your heart. In the same way, you're placing this inside, and you can lie back in any comfortable kind of position, place this inside and just feel its emanation. Just feel the gemstone inside of you. Later, there are rituals, and this is something we can get more into if we come together, for example, in the women's courses. There's another women's course starting in March. So a 5-week course, which is on Ayurveda and Tantra for women. But we start to do some practices with these to also strengthen the area, to heal the area, and to also increase our sense of comfort, of being connected. Sometimes our yonis are totally numb. Any of us had that experience? I've had that experience. It's like, We're just shut off, right? So also these can really help, or just generally meditating upon being with. Why is it that there's a numbness there? Why is it that I shut myself off? Why am I in pleasure anorexia, if I can say it in that way? Pleasure denying rather than, the other side of the spectrum, pleasure craving, like we talked about. What I see is that for men, when they're disconnected to true loving pleasure, they move to pleasure craving more often. And when women are disconnected from their middle placement of loving pleasure in their lives in general, just pleasure in life, having a nice bath, going to the spa. I'm going to the spa on Monday. Yes, like pleasure, love, right? When women are disconnected from that, where do they tend to go with tension and stress? To pleasure denial. So there's kind of these two sides of the spectrum that I notice that happen, and we can all find ourselves back into a middle point as well. So even being with the contemplation about that, but the contemplation can become embodied with things like the eggs. And later we can even stand up over a mat and try to move these within inside of us. And some of you are like, say what? So we talked about the organ of the heart. There's a muscle, that we're training in our hearts and our beings. There's also muscles in our yoni, and these two are connected. The love and the pleasure seat are connected. And we can actually start to learn to move these within. They have a little hole in them. So you can put a little unwaxed, unscented dental floss in these so that, it's not going anywhere. Because a lot of people ask the question like, oh my God, am I going to lose this inside of me? Where's it going to go? Right? So we can learn to move it. And even later, if you ever want to really work on those yoni muscles, or we've dealt with atrophy, or we're dealing with pelvic prolapse, you can even put a little, no pun intended, a little nut around it, and you can increase the size of the nut to even put a little weight on them. So you can even start doing what's called vaginal weightlifting. Now I'll be like, sorry? This is some of the gifts of the yoni eggs. Of course, you have to wash them well, etc. There's more info on our website also over at RASA. But just being with these, just by having a little ritual, a little altered ritual of lying down, being with ourselves, maybe massaging the area, a little bit of self-pleasuring, and then inserting this, that alone is like a welcoming of deepened inquiry into our yonis, what's held here, the power, the pleasure, all of that. So just that can be a beautiful ritual for us to take the time to do, right? Similarly, I brought also the yoni wand to show you. And some of us get intimidated when I show this because it's like, Tiffany's holding a dildo. She seems so pure and sattvic. What's happening? So this is the yoni wand. And I know it can look intimidating. I feel funny, showing it to all of you in this way. But the yoni wands are amazing. They're made out of obsidian. So this is an obsidian wand. And don't drop them. I've had a few women who have dropped these. And they do break. Lisa included, I think, also dropped hers. So they will break. They come in this nice little velvet pouch also. And so the yoni wand, of course, it can be a pleasure tool as far as something that we use with ourselves or a partner. But more than that, it can be a beautiful tool for massage. Again, for embodied inquiry. A lot of us are even blocked to touching ourselves or just bringing an inquiry, massaging our cervix. In the tantric tradition, it's well known that we can have deeper orgasms than just a clitoral orgasm. I shouldn't even say just. A clitoral orgasm is also beautiful, but that we can have really deep orgasms, even from what's called our cervix, which is called a cervical orgasm. Many of us have heard of G-spot orgasms, or in the women's course, I go more into this. Just knowing this can be so revealing for a lot of us when it comes to pleasure. To start to experience and massage on deeper levels and to feel what's held in our cervixes also, because a lot of times our cervix will hold either that numbness, again, the denial, the pleasure denial, or pain, trauma, our emotional holding. Our yonis really are like a map of our lives as women. They're the most deepest seat of us. So for a lot of us, this is the area which can hold some of our, emotional and mental history, if we can say it in that way. That's why a lot of times when we do have, a beautiful connection with our partner or lovemaking or even our own self-pleasure, we might cry or laugh or different things might come up because it's literally an unlocking of some of the things that have been held in this area. So the yoni wand is something that we can use ourselves, like you would use, again, a massage wand or a massage tool on your shoulders or somewhere on the body. You can similarly use this internally. And sometimes I feel like, in our sexual liberation, it's almost like we've gone so far towards naughty sexuality and all of that, that just talking about this and seeing the purity in it, we're a little bit, again, eclipsed to. Like, it can be a pure, beautiful, adoring experience with yourself or with another to use something like a yoni wand. It can be a beautiful experience to even just do this sensually. It doesn't even have to be directed towards orgasm or anything besides healing and opening the area. We've already come to an hour, dear ones. Somehow that happened. I want to see what's there for all of you. It looks like we probably need a part 2. I'm wondering if if any of you or all of you want to come off mute, and if there's anything you want to share from some of the contemplations from this morning, anything that's there for you, or any questions that you might have right now.
This is actually, oh, hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hi.
Oh, Melissa, we could hear you, and then you blocked out. Now we don't hear you again.
Hello.
We can kind of hear hello. It's coming in and out, but we can see your lovely smiling face.
It's fine.
You can always write me questions also, and maybe we will have a part 2 as well. Does anyone else have any questions or things that are coming up right now?
Tiffany, I was just going to share that the drawing the purity back towards the subject, because there's such an overflow of alternative messages. If you are online in any way, in any capacity, media wise, culturally wise, and even just, I think, in encounters with each other, this is just the new approach, like the naughtiness or the, all the other aspects, which I think is okay as well. But to come back to the remembrance of the purity is so beautiful. Really, that's really landing, and it's really anchoring, and it's grounding is really helpful.
Oh, thank you for this, Jen. You said it in a beautiful way, much more beautiful than me. And I feel like, what would it look like for us to be so liberated in our sexuality and pleasure, and at the same time maintain sattva, maintain purity within it? Like, this is a new way. This is revolutionary. Because, and it's not that the naughtiness also doesn't have an aspect here as well, but it's the inclusivity to all of it, and the inclusivity to love as well. Like, that love be part of that, not apart from it. Not that it be lust or love, that all of that can be there, and I feel this is so important. And for young women also, I feel, a real importance around this. I was sharing yesterday with one of you that I've been working with more and more young women, like teenage women, and it just speaks to my heart so deeply, because they often confide in me, and we talk about bringing a depth of respect and love for their own embodiments and who they share them with. And it's amazing for me to see these women truly resourced at a young age, to say, like, this is how I want to choose who enters this space, how they enter this space, what my pleasure is, and how I receive pleasure. And it's really beautiful. So thank you for saying that, Jen. Anyone else want to share anything?
Yeah, I loved what you said, Jen, and how you said it. And it was so nice to, just to hear the sacredness and the full aspect of sex and Ayurveda, and some good reminders for me. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, beautiful friend. Anyone else want to share anything this morning? I hope in some way in our short sharing this morning, this has been a gift to all of us to have a Saturday morning together. And it really wasn't intended as any kind of pitch. I had forgotten until now that we do have that women's course coming up in March, but now I feel to highlight it for you because this topic just tends to be in correspondence. So there is it's a 3-level course that I offer, but the first level starts in March, and it's 5 weeks. So 2-hour sessions, 5 2-hour sessions. So that'll be coming up in March. But keep your eyes out and also your emails, and please share with others about other upcoming webinars. And we'll keep trying to do webinars like this, where we can be in a more contained and intimate space, and where we can share about different topics and the application of Ayurveda to them. Any last thing that's there for anyone? Okay, and you can always hop on the website and see some things that have been written around kama, around pleasure, and also around the yoni eggs, as well as the yoni wand, as well as our sacred yoni elixir. So I don't have the sacred yoni elixir here, but it's an amazing yoni oil that I formulated for various reasons. One, just to give abhyanga, to give oiling and love and a facelift to your yoni. To be honest, it's glowy. When I travel, I often share with a lot of you that I only take my yoni elixir, and it goes down there and up here and here. It's like I use it everywhere. It's an amazing oil, but it can also be used as a natural lube. And it's also a wonderful one if you have a history, so preventatively, for yeast infections or UTIs. It's a great one to bring a balance to the alkalinity of the yoni. So we also suggest it pre and postnatally for healing, and also for preparing for birth. So you can see different things there in our women's health section, especially. Okay, so you can hop on there for some resources, and stay tuned for other webinars. Okay, let's take one moment to chant ourselves out. Okay, I'm going to chant a peace prayer. And may this bring peace to your day, and also peace to your yonis. Let's bring our hands to heart if possible, and I'll chant. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu nirahamaya, sarve bhadrani pashantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Namaste. Thank you all so much for joining. It was nice to connect in this way, and I hope we'll see each other again real soon. Have a beautiful weekend, everyone, and stay safe if it's snowing and you're out on the road, okay? Everyone stay super safe. Okay, we'll see each other again soon. Bye, all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, dear ones.